Good afternoon, Marine. Tell me your name and where you're from.
My name is Bruce Balto, and I grew up in Chicago. I've lived in New York City and in northern Wisconsin, and I now live in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay. So, when did you serve in MASS-3?
I got with that unit in Vietnam in 1970, and I left Vietnam in 1971, and I remained with MASS-3 because the entire unit pulled out and went into El Toro, California.
Where were you stationed?
I went through boot camp in San Diego, went to infantry training at Camp Pendleton, and again Camp Pendleton again for staging battalion, which was more infantry training. But I trained at an electronics operators course over at 29 Palms, California. I went to Vietnam about 1970, came back in 71, as I said. So.
Okay. And what was your job?
When I was assigned, when I first got to Vietnam, my job was for 3 or 4 weeks just to sit on a perimeter overnight with a buddy in one of 13 different bunkers they had there, although we would rarely sit in the bunker, except one of us would generally sleep, one of us would stay awake and on top of the bunker because you couldn't see anything outside of it. So at least one person had to remain awake. Now that was the first 3 or 4 weeks. After that, a captain by the name of Captain Puglisi took the 7 of us who came over from El Toro, and he split us up. He sent some to the air support radar team and some down to the DASC, which is an acronym for Direct Air Support Center. And I was working out of the DASC at the Division Command Center most of the time, and then every 1 week out of every 3 or 4, I'd have to rotate back up to the Hill 327 in order to do the perimeter work. So
what did you like about your service with MASS-3?
It was interesting. It got me, I think, it was a kind of a unique experience. I don't think many other people had that kind of experience. It also got you a little bit of, I don't think enlisted men, I don't think many people, the officer corps shared much with enlisted men, but nonetheless, if you work in the DASC, what you're doing is coordinating air support for the infantry. And we used to coordinate close air support, sometimes 8 flights a day, sometimes 12 or 14 flights a day if something big was happening, and you learn how these aircraft are controlled to make their bomb drops. And there were several different methods for that. We also used to coordinate medevacs, and there'd be, everything ranging from emergencies to simply routine. A mid-grade would have been urgent, and we coordinated reconnaissance extractions, and there were a lot of strange things that happened on those that you would hear about. And so it was pretty remarkable in that respect.
What about some interesting stories?
I once ran a medevac at night, I believe, and it was horribly foggy out. It was the middle of the night, and a couple of bored Marines, one of them had somehow been tinkering with a grenade and essentially set the grenade off. And so they were looking for an emergency medevac for him and his friend. And so these helicopters launched. They generally had 2 cargo helicopters, CH-46s, going out. They were accompanied by 2 Cobra gunships, but no one could see anything in the fog, and they somehow, I guess the pilots electronically managed to find their way more or less over this position, but in a very general way, and again, everything was socked in with fog. One of the pilots said, "Go ahead and have have everybody on the hill get out all the pyrotechnics, in other words, pop-ups, signals, flares that shot into the air. And he essentially told them when to launch this stuff, and the pilot actually somehow saw the glow, landed, and picked these guys up. You know, remarkable.
Very remarkable. Yeah. Anything else? I mean,
There was another reconnaissance extractions involving one guy who had been mauled and then partially eaten by a tiger.
that's a most unusual story.
Yeah, but I've heard it, I think I saw it replicated once or twice on the internet at other times in somewhat other places in Southeast Asia or Vietnam. And there was another time, and there were a few funny things sometimes not so funny things. One time we were running a reconnaissance extraction, and these were typically run when their position was found, because they were out in the middle of nowhere in 6 to 9 man teams. And so if their position was discovered, we would try to get them out of there really fast. These guys they had something called a spy rig, SPIE, which was short for Special Insertion and Extraction Harness or cable. What the helicopters could do is hover above the jungle, drop the cable in, and they would lift these guys right out of the jungle, and you could see them coming back dangling from the bottom of the helicopter. One time, and they had very good equipment, you could hear them whispering on the radio. We would usually monitor all this as it was happening. And one time, these guys we were extracting, they had been in a firefight, and they weren't whispering. They were panting, and they were really wanting to get out of there. And so one of the guys in the recon team said, we had a couple of prisoners, but they tried some funny stuff, so we shot them. And one of the lieutenants in the desk said they probably farted. So that's all you have to do to get shot by a recon Marine especially. So, and then there was another time when we would have to pass on targets to our air support radar team, which would control bomb drops, and somebody transposed 2 grid coordinate digits, and we dropped 22 500-pound bombs just about 800 meters from a living area. And on that day I was sitting in a crew chief position, and I got a call from an angry major, and I just did my best to transfer it to the major, the officer in charge, sitting in the back of the desk in his glass booth. They tracked it down to some guy who he screwed up the 2 digits. And it was passed on, and it wasn't caught until after the bomb drop. It's a good thing nobody got hurt, really, but looking back on it, it was kind of amusing to me. So there was another time when we were on perimeter watch, and the hill 327 up there, where we would do the perimeter watch, was essentially wrecked. A typhoon had passed through. I thought I recalled this had happened in January or February, but in fact, I think, looking back on some documents on the internet, I think it may have happened in November of 1970. And so what happened was they moved the perimeter up off the lower level of the hill entirely, because a lot of those hooches and storage buildings were wrecked. But there were 2 guys sitting, keeping an eye on the arms shack, which they had extra explosives, grenades, ammunition, etc. in there. And they said they thought they saw some movement. They wanted us to, we were on the upper level of the hill, but right next to them, and they asked us to shoot up a pop-up. And I asked my friend to do it because I wasn't sure I could do it right, and he shot one up, and the pop-up went up, and we started seeing all kinds of tracer rounds going out. Well, next morning, we didn't find anything. There was a tunnel dug up on the bottom of the hill on that level. We had to blow it up.
Well, thank you, Maureen, for your
Okay.
stories and your service.
Thank you.